Have you ever excitedly bought an abundance of plants in the spring just to take them home and have them die? Me too. Well, don't worry, it's not because you have a black thumb. Today we're talking about why most gardeners fail and tips for how we can avoid it. Welcome to the Garden Gamble, where we're planting hope, taking chances, and growing memories for every season. I'm Ricky Clausen, owner of Clausen's Greenhouse in northern Minnesota. This podcast is for anyone who's ever stood in the garden, greenhouse, or backyard wondering if they're doing it right. Here we talk real-life gardening, the wins, the mistakes, and everything we learn along the way. Whether you're new to plants or have dirt permanently under your nails, you're in the right place. Let's take the gamble and grow together. Well, welcome everybody to the very first podcast episode of the Garden Gamble. My name is Ricky Clausen, owner of Clausen's Greenhouse here in northern Minnesota. We are gearing up for our 8th growing season here at the greenhouse, and we are just so excited to be back working with plants again after the long winter. It is currently mid-March here, so we are in full swing. It is very busy and very hectic here at the greenhouse. We've got a lot of really great help, and we're just so excited. This year we actually just went through a pretty big expansion where we added a new retail space and 2 new greenhouses that are 34 by 120 each. So we've got a lot of new space to fill, but like I said, we've got lots of great help going into this season. And I'm just really excited to be able to share more in-depth tips and tricks with you with this podcast. I'm hoping that you can learn from my past mistakes and that I can give you some great knowledge that you can take with you into this growing season and for gardening seasons to come. So let's jump into today's episode of why most gardeners fail and how we can avoid it. Today I broke this down into 3 main ideas. We're going to talk through each one as we go along in the podcast today. So let's jump into the very first one here of why most gardeners fail or think that they have a black thumb when they really don't. The first one is people come in overly eager and unrealistic expectations that they have going into the gardening season. Of all the ones that we're going to talk about today, I would say I fall into this category the most. Sometimes I am definitely overeager, and sometimes my expectations are maybe not where they're supposed to be. So I'm definitely right there too, which is easy to do after the long winter, especially here in northern Minnesota. A lot of us are just itching for spring. We're so excited. And so when the greenhouses and garden centers open for the year, we're just pumped. And lots of times we see customers that come in and they're just so excited to be buying at their plants that they maybe overdo it and buy too much. And it's just a little bit overwhelming once they get it home and it's too much for them to handle. Another thing that we see is many people that plant too early. Here we still have frost in the first part of May oftentimes. So sometimes we see customers that are coming back later in the season because their plants got frostbitten because they planted too early before that last frost date. Another thing that we see oftentimes is people come in over budget. It's good to come in with a budget in mind because you don't want to start the gardening season off on a bad foot by overspending too much at the garden center or at the greenhouse. So we want you to be happy when you leave and that you didn't spend too much. All right, this next little part here of being overly eager and having some unrealistic expectations, this is where I fall into this category, is biting off more than you can chew. I definitely have done this multiple times, but I'm going to give you a little story of when I did this most recently. Here at the greenhouse, we also have a flower farm where I grow cut flowers throughout the season to make fresh bouquets for customers and host different events. And I was so pumped to try tulips for cut flowers. I bought thousands and thousands of tulips, planted them in the fall. I was so eager and excited to have them bloom in the spring. I was thinking that it would fit into what we do just perfectly And that just simply wasn't the case. I thought, sure, like every morning I would be able to go out and check the tulips, harvest what was ready, and that just is not how that worked out. So if you're not a flower farmer or familiar with this, tulips, you want to harvest them at a very, very specific window when they're mostly closed. They're just showing a little bit of color, or if they blow open, they are basically worthless as a cut flower, where florists don't want it. They're not going to last in the vase and your bouquets. So if they're blowing open, they are of no use as a cut flower. And we had a little string of, I guess you could say, bad luck in May. It was actually over Mother's Day weekend, which is by far our busiest weekend of the year here at the greenhouse. We had 3 days of 90-degree weather, and tulips on a regular day can blow open in a matter of hours. Well, we had 90 degrees for 3 days over the busiest weekend of the year, and basically all of my tulips that I planted all blew open during those days. I didn't have time to check it because we're busy out here running the greenhouse. We do a big sale that weekend. So I lost a whole bunch of tulips, thousands and thousands of tulips, because I bit off more than I can chew. And I had an unrealistic expectation of how I could handle all of that. And now you might be saying, well, like, Ricky, I'm not going to be planting thousands and thousands of tulips. Well, even as just a regular home gardener, not necessarily as a flower farmer, you can still definitely bite off more than you can chew just by planting more than what fits into your lifestyle and your life and what you can handle as a garden, because it's a great thing to have during the summer, but it is a little bit of extra work, even though it's definitely worth it. Another thing to watch out for, kind of under the same category, is trends and social media. Even in the gardening world, you'll see lots of trends that will come through, and social media is just a highlight reel of what everyone is doing right. So if you have that unrealistic expectation that you're going to have the perfect weed-free garden and it doesn't happen, you can feel really defeated. So when you see all those big gardens on social media, just know that that is just the highlights and not always necessarily showing the behind the scenes of all of the work that has to go into it. And you might see on there too a lot of influencers or gardeners that have these huge, beautiful, lush gardens. Lots of times that takes years and years to get to that size and to that point, especially if it's a perennial garden. It takes a while for those things to get established. So kind of keeping that in mind, that it doesn't have to get that big and it doesn't have to be just like you see on social media, because you can do that over a longer period of time. It doesn't have to look like that right out of the gate. So just kind of be aware of that. And of course, with that too, I just have a note here. Weeding, the common enemy amongst all gardeners, whether you're a container gardener, a vegetable gardener, if you just do perennials, annuals, we're all doing weeding. And the more plants and the more space that you use to garden, the more weeds that you have. So when you're overly eager to plant all these things, just keep that in mind, that there's also a lot of weeding that's going to go along with it, which is part of it, but just something to keep in mind. All right, so let's move on then to how can we avoid this? So you're overly eager, maybe have some unrealistic expectations, so let's figure out how to fix it. So one thing that I briefly mentioned before is ask yourself, what can you realistically manage with your schedule and lifestyle? Maybe you're a busy mom with kids that are off to sporting events all through the summer. You're going, just in a very busy season of life. We have 3 kids, so I kind of know how that goes. So what can you realistically manage in your schedule where you really want to have a garden and have that fit into your life, which is wonderful. So what size of garden, what can you do realistically to be successful? One of my biggest tips here is to start small. You can always plant more, you can always do more, but you're gonna feel so much better about yourself if you can be successful on a smaller scale rather than going large scale right away and feeling overwhelmed and not being able to keep up with it all. So start small, you can always plant more. Next tip for this category is to set a budget before you shop. I want you to feel good when you leave the greenhouse and you come home with all of these plants, because you don't want to spend a fortune on plants just to come home and have them all die. We want you to be successful, so set a budget. And along that line too, I want you to budget in some fun money, I guess you could say, into your plant budget, because you are going to see some fun plants that you maybe didn't think of before you came. There's some that are just going to jump off the bench and into your cart, I guess you could say. So kind of leave a little bit of room in your budget for something unexpected and fun. On to the next idea, and that is you bought the wrong plants. I see this oftentimes especially when people say, oh, I've just got a black thumb, and we dig a little bit deeper into why they feel that way. It's often because they bought the wrong plants for their gardens and their containers. Oftentimes, like I just said, you want to add it into your budget, that fun money, but lots of times we see people come in and they just pick up what's pretty and they don't pay attention to what that plant really needs in order for it to be successful. So I want you to make sure that you take the time to learn a little bit about that plant. And the best way to do that is to read the tags. When you go to our greenhouse or even like your local garden center, you'll find that in all of the pots and packs will be a little tag. It's got the name of the plant, and oftentimes on the back side of it, it's going to tell you the care that that plant needs. It's going to tell you what kind of sunlight that it likes, watering schedule it should be on, like does it like it a little more dry, does it like it evenly moist, is it going to die if it dries out? There's just all kinds of information usually on those tags. And you might be telling me, like, Ricky, I've got a big list of plants. I've got a lot of pots to fill. I've got a big space in my garden. I'm not going to take the time to read the tag on every single container in the greenhouse. And I'm not asking you to do that. So what I would do is I would start with one that really stands out to you right away, one that jumps out at you, read the tag, get to know that plant, and then from there, go find some that are going to be great companion plants with that one. One thing we do here at the greenhouse to kind of help you with your shopping experience is we added these little like tags or like signage that says like shade loving, heat loving, just to kind of help narrow down and just like a quick glimpse, like, oh, this one prefers the shade. This one is going to do really well in the hot spot up by my house. So you don't have to necessarily read every single tag on every single plant when you come here. You'd be here all day. The next thing about like when you buy the wrong plants is some spacing issues. Different plants have different vigor. So you might be picking up a plant that is a super vigorous one. Let's say like a Vista bubblegum petunia. They are super, super vigorous. Where if you plant those with some not so vigorous plants, it's just going to swallow them up in your containers or in your landscape. So make sure to keep space in mind also. That can also go for vegetables and perennials. You plant them too close together, they're just not going to thrive. They might die out because they're choking out other plants around them. So make sure that you keep space in mind as you are shopping at the garden center. All right, so you bought the wrong plants. How can we fix it? Obviously, just buy the right plants. No, I'm just kidding. Like I said, read the tags. And the other thing is set up a plan before you come. Know where your plant's going in your yard, what kind of sunlight that they need, how much space that you have, so you know how much to get, what kind of plants to get, and you're going to be so much more successful if you come in with a plan. And the last one of why most gardeners fail is water and soil issues. Watering is one of the biggest things that we see people struggle with, and it doesn't have to be hard. So the first thing is if you are a container gardener or you're planting in pots, is not having a big enough pot. There's not enough volume of soil there for your plants to be successful. And there's a few reasons for that. You're either overplanting or it's just too small in general. But most of the time you're overplanting in a smaller pot where your plants that you plant in there are going to get root bound. If they're too close together, there's too many in a pot, they're going to get root bound, and then they're also going to dry out much faster because all of those plants are going to be fighting for the water that you put in the pot. That it's just going to dry out lickety split. Part of that is difficult soil. Depending on where you live, if you're planting like directly into the ground, like for your vegetable gardens, the flower beds, sometimes you might just have some tricky soil, whether it's like super clay soil, maybe it's very sandy. There's a lot of different factors that can go into your soil. There's a few things that you can do to kind of combat that I will kind of talk about here in just a second. Next thing is too much or too little water. Sometimes you can kill them with kindness by overwatering. If you have a pot that you are just dousing in water, maybe you didn't put drainage holes in the bottom, they're gonna root rot. There's gonna be root rot at the bottom because you overwatered it. You'll see this oftentimes too, sometimes with succulents. They kind of like to be on the drier side, so you can kill them with kindness and overwater them. But more often than not, it's too little water. I want you to imagine that you are just parched. You're in the desert, you haven't had anything all day, and you just get a teensy little sip every day, just a teensy little sip. You're still going to be wanting more water. You're going to be so parched, so thirsty. So when you go water your plants, water them very, very thoroughly. Rather than just a sprinkle, pour on a whole bunch of water, because that's oftentimes a lot of the issue is just too little water. And the last one is fertilizing. Lots of times people forget to fertilize or they're fertilizing incorrectly, which fertilizing can kind of feel scary, like if you're not sure what to do, how to do it. But oftentimes you can get a generic fertilizer that works on most things, or you can ask someone when you go to the greenhouse or garden center to kind of point you in the right direction on what to use. And when you buy fertilizer, whether it's in a little container or a big bag of it, whatever, there's going to be instructions on there for you. So fertilizing, water and soil issues. Later on in the podcast too, we'll probably break those down into separate episodes because I could chat with you for a very long time about water, soil, fertilizer. So later on we will talk about those in different episodes. But that is where we see gardeners fail fairly often, is having water and soil issues. So now let's talk about how to fix it. The first part is to buy the right pots. You want to make sure that there is enough room in your pots for the plants that you are putting in there. When in doubt, get a bigger pot because they can always grow and they would love to have more space more often than not. Understand your plant's watering and fertilizing needs, and to put a system or a routine in place. One tip that I have is Fertilizer Friday. Like, if you think Friday, fertilizer, I'm going to remember today is the day I need to go fertilize my plants. You can also fit it into your routine somehow. Like, in the mornings after breakfast is when I walk around my porch and water all of my pots. One thing that kind of works for me, for my own personal planters, is I like putting one up by my door where I have to walk past it every day, where if I see that those plants are starting to wilt, like, I'm gonna notice it, I'm not gonna forget it. Or if you have pots and stuff across the yard and you're already struggling with remembering to water, it's out of sight and out of mind, and you're more likely to continue to forget. So do those little things that are going to set you up for success with watering, and something that's really going to fit in your lifestyle and in your daily routine. All right, so we kind of went over the 3 reasons why most gardeners fail and a few tips for how to fix it. So we had overly eager with unrealistic expectations. And we can fix it by, of course, just having realistic expectations to set yourself up for success and to start small so you can enjoy it. You can always plant more. Number 2 was you bought the wrong plants. We can fix it by coming in with a plan. Consider the watering needs, where your plants are going to be going, what kind of sunlight they're going to need, and the space that you have at home. And number 3, watering and soil issues. Find the right pot and the right spot for your plants and gardens, and put watering and fertilizing systems in place. There are lots of different like automated watering and things that you can do also, but that'll be for a different day. All right, so I'm so thankful that you joined us here on the very first episode of the Garden Gamble. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm just so excited to be able to share some of our knowledge that we've gained over the past few years as being garden center owners, greenhouse owners, and just avid gardeners ourselves. Really looking forward to this upcoming growing season. We've got tons of plants that are growing right now in our seed room. I've got stuff for the flower farm that will be growing throughout the summer. So we're really excited to have you join us on the Garden Gamble. We will be doing this every single week, and we can't wait to see you. One thing before we head out here is, what can you do right now? So it is the middle of March. So obviously we're not out in the gardens yet, at least not here in northern Minnesota. There's still snow and ice, and it's just far too cold to be doing that. So what can you do right now after you're done listening to this episode? You get to do the fun part, at least in my opinion, is to start daydreaming. Start coming up with that plan, set your budget, analyze the spots in your yard that you're hoping to grow in, and think of ways that you can fit gardening into your everyday life. This is a great time to plan. This is the planning stage of gardening. So you can scroll through Pinterest, look at old photos, things that you've been successful with in the past, and just start getting those ideas flowing. So when we open on May 1st, you can come out to the garden center with a plan, with a budget, and knowledge from this podcast. And so you can be confident in your purchases and be a successful gardener in this upcoming season. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm hoping that these few tips and tricks that you took from this podcast will help you take the gamble out of gardening in this upcoming season. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me on the Garden Gamble. If you loved this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with a fellow plant lover. Gardening isn't a gamble when you have the right guidance, and you don't have to figure it out alone. Until next time, take care.